My name's Max Gagliardi, and this is Always Be Building. If you're watching this video, take a moment, hit the subscribe button on YouTube, or you can follow me on your favorite podcast app. Hope you enjoy the show.
Where I have the most experience doing it practically is really in cities and building normal buildings. Where do you look at the entrance? And so it's a mix of, okay, you're a new building on the block, and this applies to developments that have planned developments like what you guys are doing. You place the building in a way that is going to address the community, and so that's kind of the first thing you need to consider. I always tell people 99% of the people who experience your building are never actually going to go inside of it. And so that's something really important to keep in mind. And how it the approach to it, how it makes you feel, the materials, the entrance, the scale is really important. And so all of those things go into programming. Thinking, particularly in the case of like you guys, where you have paths, there's the connection of all these places through the paths and the trails, and you have creek beds, and you have all these sort of systems. Really thinking how the buildings interact with them is really important, right? Like you can't try to site a building like over a creek bed, like just don't do it. And so they begin to give you these boundaries. And I love projects with boundaries, because it's kind of like, it's that saying where like the boards make the hockey game. Like if you don't have boards, that's not a very fun hockey game. So these boundaries begin to really sort of tell you where the buildings want to be. And then it's more a matter of whom do these buildings want to be? Like, how are they, am I the clubhouse? If I'm the clubhouse, I got to be bigger than the rest of the buildings around me. And so we talked a lot about scale, right? And so it's a very simple building. You guys are building in an area that has a very strong vernacular architecture. And so how do we honor what exists, but make it special? So we make a very simple building with a nod to the vernacular, but it's huge, right? And so then it's like, oh, that's the clubhouse. It doesn't look like every single other house. And so, obviously the way we're facing it too, the way we located the pool, just so that you get sunlight all day, and those are, in my mind, they're like minimal architectural, like that's just minimal architectural thinking. Like, don't put your pool in a place where it's going to be in the shade all day, because then what's the point? So I think, in terms of siting buildings, first thing is you address the place. Second, scale. And that goes in the way it presents itself, but the way that people approach it. Like, at what moment do you get small enough where people feel comfortable? Okay, this is the entrance. And then obviously if you're doing like an urban, and we talked about it in the case for you guys too, is safety. Like, am I going to be having to walk through a place where now I'm crossing a driveway, like a very active driveway? Are we setting it up in a way where kids are going to be running through a street between the parking lot and the playground? Like, that's, so thinking through like the logistics and specifics of safety and the human experience, all really come into play. But I think, yeah, like sighting for the views and sighting for the light and that kind of stuff, to me, is really the most fascinating part about my education, which was super technical. Like, that came from there. There was no, like, I would give the University of Miami School of Architecture a lot of credit in terms of that. And then subsequently the practices that I worked at, including the landscape place, for a lot of that very thoughtful approach to saying, well, you want to put these plants here because they're going to buffer your pool equipment, or all of that stuff really comes through from a technical background. And so that's why I say I rely on my degrees all the time, because I don't think that I'd be able to do that without having the awareness that these things exist, and then with the practice of them layered on them, that it's gotten, I've gotten to see a lot of these buildings built. I've gotten to see a lot of these planned communities built. And so not as many planned communities as buildings, but I've seen a lot of these urban plans come to life. And so that, it's like, oh yeah, it works. So it's cool.
What's really fascinating to me about it is that the things that you're talking about, and especially when you're applying them to our project, it seems very, like when you say it, I'm like, oh, that makes total sense. That's genius. Like, that is like really smart. And why didn't I think of that? And it's just like very almost, I don't want to say common sense, but like it's very practical and it makes sense when you say it. But like it's almost like we're blind to some things because we just haven't thought about it through that lens. Just simple stuff, even it's like, man, that's a really good thought. I'm glad that you brought that up. But like, what are some of the things you've seen, pitfalls that people have done? You don't have to give any specific names, but just some issues around programming or around those types of layout decisions that were really not good that they did.
Yeah. I mean, the biggest issue I see people have is when they make things too big. Like I rarely, sometimes you'll see like bedrooms that are too small, a little too small, but it's like a footer. It's not like, oh my gosh, guys, like what I see the complete opposite. Like you'll get these like massive lobbies, for example, for buildings that you're like, what are you like? You gonna play tennis in there? Like what's the point?